It's mid-August and the tiny tropical garden is in full leaf and having to battle against the unusually strong mid-August coastal winds. Let's get into episode 34. Gigantic jungle leaves did not evolve to be planted this close to the coast and to deal with such strong winds, so this is a challenge for my garden. And I try and work around it by planting tough shrubs like laurel to diffuse the wind and protect the more tender and delicate plants. And I will even plant these plants really densely. As they sway around in the wind, each plant will then support its neighbour. But with that said, it was like this all of Saturday, so I had fingers crossed the weather would be better on Sunday. The wind had relented a bit, but there was definite damage in the garden. The albizia tree was horizontal, and I could just see so many of the leaves were shredded. I went out into the garden for a closer look. The pride and joy that is my homemade bird feeder was blown clean off the post and did quite a bit of damage on its way down, crushing the rose and snapping stems off the Salvia amistad. Some were too late to save, but others I'm going to take cuttings from. We all love verbena for wafting in a breeze, but in a strong gale, it just snaps clean off. And succulents had uprooted and were just rolling around all over the garden. But the big-leafed plants were the worst casualties. Luckily, this colocasia didn't really suffer more than a slight tear in the leaf, and I'm sure it will recover. But the Enseti banana was absolutely shredded. Now I try not to get too sad about this, because they've evolved to do this so that they don't act as giant sails in the wind, and the midrib, the part of the leaf that carries food down to the main plant, stays intact. The blooms on my canna seemed a bit smaller than the day before, and a quick look around in the undergrowth showed why. There were flower buds just scattered about and floating in the stream. And planted in the stream, the carnivorous plants were suffering too, with some of the pitchers bent ready to be pruned off. And the sprawling passion flower vine had been ripped clean off the wall, and in a matter of hours, its tendrils were clinging onto the magnolia for dear life. I'm going to have to cut this passion flower back hard to reduce the weight of the vine so this doesn't happen again. The exotic leaves of my Musa Bastu banana got absolutely shredded in the gales. But look again, the midrib's ability to stay intact throughout these winds when the rest of the leaf is shredded is just unbelievable. It shows how resilient some of these plants can be. And even though my Paulownia tree has absolutely enormous leaves, there weren't too many that were damaged, and the ones that were easily removed. Look at the size of these leaves. And when the gale force winds started to die down, I picked up the albizia tree, and to my surprise, it had bloomed more even though it had been led on the floor most of the weekend. They are really exotic looking flowers, just so delicate you can see why its common name is the silk tree. But it was time for me to hit the road. Mike Clifford from Mike's Rare Plants had opened up his garden and I wasn't going to miss it. I managed to get a few video clips to show you guys how great his garden is. It's so densely planted with such a big array of plants. Mike was selling a great selection of plants as well. And when I arrived, his garden had only been open less than 10 minutes, but there was already a stream of people leaving with the treasures they'd bought from his plant sale. Needless to say, I quickly parked the car and jumped out to make sure I could get some of these plants. I managed to buy a Hedychium tara and a Rolldana, and I'll show you these a bit later on. But see what I mean? In just these few shots, you've seen so many plants, and his garden isn't massive. Yeah, it's bigger than the tiny tropical garden, but he's managed to do a lot in a small space. From air plants to bromeliads, shade plants and sun-loving plants. If you ever get the chance, make sure you go and visit. But back in the tiny tropical garden on Sunday evening, once the wind had finally stopped, you can see my new Rolldana at the back there, just in front of the banana. It's a great evergreen shrub, and there's information about this plant on tinytropicalgarden.co.uk. I'll put a link in the description. But the rain that came with the wind actually brought on quite a few of the plants, and the nicotiana is now so close to blooming. And the Alchemilla just keeps opening bloom after bloom, and it's just brightening up the garden, especially when the weather's as bad as this. The pinks and the reds keep getting more intense as the amaranthus and dahlia continue to bloom. And my Eucalyptus bicolour, or pineapple lily, is starting to open up its blooms, which is attracting all sorts of insects, and it is a really exotic looking plant, and I think I'm going to try and get more species of this, having seen so many in Mike's garden. After a sweep up and plenty of pruning, the garden looked back in order. And if I'm honest, I think parts of it actually looked better. Maybe I need to be a bit braver with my pruning in the future, just to give more plants space. I'm going to be adding plant profiles from the plants I saw at Mike Clifford's garden to the Tiny Tropical Garden website, so be sure to check that out, and hit subscribe if you like this video. As always, thank you so much for watching, and comment below if you've got any tips or questions. See you next week.